Welcome to another crash course in history session. We have finally left the Baroque era and we are now moving into the classical era. Now I know yesterday's presentation was really long, relatively speaking, so I'm going to make this one a little bit shorter today, a little less listening to do, but some great excerpts to listen to nonetheless. So now that we're in the classical era, begin thinking about what piece you'd like to choose or what composer you'd like to pick for this particular era on your project. All right, here we go. So, the classical era, we are talking about the mid-1700s to the early 1800s, and it's not always very well defined. Most scholars are going to say it's about 1730 to the early 1800s. This is an era where we see a lot more self-supporting musicians. We see people working to earn a living by writing music, teaching music, and performing music. You're seeing less and less people making a career just by being supported by political leaders and the wealthy. People are writing music for public amateurs to purchase and to enjoy. This is also a time of the Enlightenment. This is a time where there's growing concern for individual rights. This is where our nation really begins coming to being, and of course we have the Revolutionary War at this time, and then you have the French Revolution that follows not long after. This is also the time of the birth of the public concert. Prior to this, concerts were really private events, but now we have this concept of individuals or groups putting on a concert and anyone from the public can buy a ticket to come. So this is kind of a new concept that's going on at this time. We also have a shift in music philosophy from music being just about glorifying God to music being about glorifying man and nature. This is kind of that Enlightenment thinking of man and reason. We also see in music something new called periodicity. And this is something we talked about a little bit in West Winds when we were doing composing, but periodicity is this idea of musical sentences or phrases. If you think about some of the Baroque music we listened to, it just felt like it went on and on. There was one overlapping melody, then another, and it just kind of circled round and round and round. Periodicity is this idea of phrases and cadences. So if you're in the key of G, for example, something else, but there you can feel a natural pause in the music. And it's still going on, but we still haven't reached a conclusion. There's another natural pause in the music. So that's what periodicity is, these natural pauses and phrasing in music. You also have something called the Alberti bass that shows up, which is really cool. You heard me playing a lot in chords there. So this is the idea where you take that chord and you move it into some fast-moving arpeggios. Arpeggios are all those individual notes of the chord broken up. So from this to all those individual notes. So an example of an Alberti bass might sound something like this. That would be an example of an Alberti bass, and you're going to hear some of that. In fact, there's an optional listening excerpt, if you'd like to, by Domenico Alberti, the man for whom this is named. It's his Sonata number 3 in his Opus 1 set of sonatas. And if you'd like to, take a listen to just the beginning of it, and you're going to hear that Alberti bass. This is a new technique that shows up during this time. All right, but let's go on. So, opera is now starting to shift and change a little bit too. Up to this point, opera's mostly been about serious dramatic works. There's been some other types, but now we're starting to really see the growth of a new type of opera. In Italian, it's called opera buffa, which is comedic opera is what it is, opposed to opera seria, which unsurprisingly is serious opera. In France, you've got it called opera comique. You've got ballad opera in English and Singspiel in German. The difference between those and the Italian opera buffa, though, is those others have spoken parts as well. So not everything is sung. There's also some spoken dialogue. You've also got these little comic operas called intermezzos that show up. And if you know the term intermezzo, you might recognize it. It's similar to the word intermission. And these are tiny little operas that take place in intermissions between the acts of a more serious opera. You also have the development of the finale in the opera buffa. This is a last song where everybody gets onto the stage. So it's not unlike what we see in most musicals today. By the end, almost everybody's involved in the last song or the last scene. So what I'd like you to listen to now, and this one I would like you to listen to, there's a very short little song from one of those ballad operas from this era. It's called The Beggar's Opera by John Gay, and I want you to listen to this short little song in there. It's a little love song, If My Heart Were Like a Bee, basically. And you'll hear how it's a totally different character from the opera music we've listened to so far. It's lighthearted and kind of fun. So take a listen to that short little song and then come back and join us. Now, at this point, some people saw opera as becoming a little too much about showing off the singers and just adding ornamental bits just to be flashy. And so there were reformers at this time who thought that opera really needed to go back to its roots of the music serving predominantly to move the story and to elicit the mood. It wasn't about showing off a rock star opera singer. It wasn't about showing how technical your writing was. It was about music serving the storyline. And one of the lead reformers in this was a guy named Christoph Gluck, who was from Bavaria, and he wrote opera that exemplified this goal. What I'm going to have you listen to is an excerpt from his Orfeo ed Euridice. And do you recognize those names? Where have we heard that story before? Right, it's the Orpheus and his lute. So the first written opera, the first commercially successful opera. It's this story again. You're going to listen to his Dance of the Furies, which is where Orpheus is down in the depths of hell and he's, facing off all the demons that are down there, whatever it might be. You're going to hear in the singing, there's an instrumental section where there's dancing, and then there's a chorus that sings. You're going to hear there's not a lot of flashy, runs and ornamentation. We listened to that oratorio music the other day. The sheep we all like sheep have gone astray, and you hear all this fancy melodic writing. You're not going to hear that here. It's very simple, but it's very powerful. It's about moving the drama itself. So I'd like you to listen to that Dance of the Furies from Gluck's opera. And then as a bonus, I'd encourage you to listen to Itzhak Perlman's recording of a violin piece that Gluck wrote. And it's one of my favorite violin pieces of all time. It's Melodie by Gluck as transcribed by Chrysler. So take a listen for sure to the opera piece. And then if you have some time, take a listen to Melodie by Gluck as well and be prepared to cry. It's great. All right, so as we mentioned, music for amateurs was again taking off during this era even more and more. You have ballads being written in England, which are poetic stories set to music. You have romance in France, which are strophic love songs, and strophic means verse, chorus, verse, chorus. You've got all these different sets of text set to the same repeating music. And then you've got Lied in German, which are German songs that are easy tunes to sing, generally simple accompaniment, though it got more complex as the genre evolved. And these set the stage for the huge amount of Lieder that we'll see in the Romantic era next, which we'll spend more time talking about then. Then you've got church music. You've got Lutheran church music, which is where we're seeing a lot of homophonic hymns. Remember, homophonic means the same rhythm, but different notes. Versus different rhythms in different parts. Then you've got Anglicanism. They're kind of staying old school, sticking more to those older polyphonic styles of music. And then you've got Catholicism, which is a mix of both going on depending on what's going on in the host country. But the last thing I want to talk about is what's going on in the colonies. So remember, through this century, in the 1700s, we are just coming into being with our own identity as a nation. Then, of course, we have the Revolutionary War that happens in the late 1700s. So what's going on with music in the colonies? Well, you've got Anglicanism in the big cities, because remember, that's a lot of what came over. You've got these English colonists that come over and they keep their Anglican beliefs. So you've got similar music there as you do back in Europe. But then you've got the Calvinists. And these people are the ones that are singing your metrical psalms. And these are metrical psalms that were written out way back in the 1600s and 1500s. And so basically it's taking the psalm words from the book of Psalms and just setting them so that they work with some kind of musical meter. And so these are just these simple melodies. They're chant-like, so you've got a lot of that. In fact, the very first book of music published in the colonies was the bass psalm book, published in 1640. It had no written tunes in it. Later editions did. But it's got all the psalms written out in a metrical form so you can sing them together as a congregation, and then everybody would learn the tune by listening or by rote. Though this need, however, arose because people were singing and singing was encouraged in churches, pastors saw a need to encourage and parents saw a need to find singing training for their kids. And so this led to the development of singing schools, which are basically music teachers would travel around from community to community teaching people how to sing. So this is kind of the beginning of music education in this country as well. You also have the development of what's called shape notes, which are really cool. Shape notes look like modern music, except that each note head has a little bit of a different shape depending on what solfege pitch, do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do, which pitch that represents. Then later, you've got William Billings, and he starts to change up what we're singing here. He starts to introduce homophonic hymn settings of the Psalms, so very much like the hymns we sing, and what are called fuguing tunes. Now remember that fugue that we listened to by Bach, where there's a subject, and then there's an answer, which is the subject set a fifth higher, while a counter subject is going on, and then the subject comes in again, and then the answer again, all in these different voices, so you have all these different lines going on. So he writes what are called these fuguing tunes. They have a homophonic section at the beginning, they have a fugue-like section in the middle with all kinds of imitation, and then you've got a homophonic conclusion. So the last thing I want you to listen to today is to listen to his fuguing tune creation from his book, The Continental Harmony. And I want you to listen for the homophonic beginning, the polyphonic middle section, and then listen to where it becomes homophonic in the end. All right, enjoy, and I'll see you tomorrow.